Hello everyone. Today I just wanted to go over the assignments that are coming up as well as the comparison contrast. There's also something I wanted to talk about as far as effective use of sources. One of the things that I saw across the board with the papers was, not all the time, but a fair percentage of the time, something we call drop quotes. And drop quotes are just where they're just kind of like dumped in there, right? And there's no real context that leads into them. So for this next paper, you're going to need to use three sources. And why do we use sources? Well, we use it to make it seem as if we understand, right, that we've researched the topic that we're dealing with, to provide some authoritative sense and also a sense of completeness. There's another reason, too. If it's not common knowledge, right, we're just showing that we got that information from somewhere. So something that's not common knowledge should also be cited in that particular way. It doesn't mean that every single source has to agree with you. So real quickly, I'm just going to go over the assignments here. So if you look under course content, you should hopefully already have seen it. So on the left-hand side, if you go to compare contrast, right, the first four are kind of what we're dealing with now. This first link right here is just a basic overview of what comparison contrast entails. Usually there's a point by point or a block method to organize your paper. The block method would be like, okay, I'm going to compare 1967 Chevy with a, I don't know, 63 whatever, Camaro, right? And so first you talk about the Chevy. You say everything about it, and then the block method, then you would switch over to the other vehicle, right? So whatever. All right. So let's see here. The comparison contrast assignment is the second module right here. So this actually lists the assignment. I wanted to give you freedom on this one. Okay. So you've got 1,000 words, three sources. You have to have a thesis that is arguing something, but you're developing it through comparison contrast. Now, since you need to have sources, some of these topics might really depend on how you take them, whether you can find sources for them. The bottom ones are kind of like problems or issues, and you could like compare and contrast solutions to those problems. So you could do it either way, like a straight comparison contrast with kind of still a thesis statement that's arguing for one, or looking at a problem and then comparing and contrasting some of the solutions to them, which might be easier to find sources on. Okay, so 1,000 words. Now, the thing that is due this Friday is not this. This is going to be due final draft November 14th. Okay, the thing that's actually going to be due this Friday is the discussion board post, writing exercise 5, where you just choose to compare like a past and present. And it says you can use you as an example. That's easy to write about. You don't have to go through all of these things, but if you maybe you can choose a few of them or even modify it a little bit. But you're doing past and present, something kind of personal, so you can expand on it pretty well. 350 words there, 2 responses by Sunday. Okay, so make the initial post by Friday at midnight, which is coming up here, and then by Sunday you'll make the responses there. Also, quiz 11 and 12, the articles for that, if you look under the modules again, those articles are found under readings and quizzes here. So quizzes 11 and 12, you have to read these articles first, and then you go to take those quizzes. Okay, and if you have any problems, let me know there. So what I wanted to do now is talk about my impression of the papers. In general, they were pretty good, right? Pretty good across the board. There's a few things, though, that we could probably improve upon. And one of them is still the use of specific details to make a paper memorable and vivid in the audience's memory and as they're experiencing it for the first time. So I wanted to give you an example of what I thought was an extremely effective consumer advertisement affecting culture paper. I'm just going to read the first 2 paragraphs. Okay, so let's go to this one. It all adds up now. Noam Chomsky said, "It's important to bear in mind that political campaigns are designed by the same people who sell toothpaste in cars. Advertising is certainly a niche profession with a highly specific purpose. In America, however, advertising has become much more than a means to promote a product or person. It's become an integral part of our society. If you're old enough to remember the popular Wendy's campaign, the word, 'Where's the beef?' conjured cheerful memories of the cute little lady who represented the chain in the 1980s. 'What's up?' automatically brings a smile to everyone's face as they recall the jovial Budweiser commercial, if you're old enough to remember it, right? And everyone knows I'm loving it from the brand that does not even have to name itself anymore. A large, rounded font, yellow M, is enough to identify it around the world. These slogans do not just reflect a product anymore. They reflect our society, which is so closely interwoven with them. Advertising heavily influences our culture. It affects our interests, values, and buying decisions. So you can see here with those specific details, this introduction is not just a carbon copy of like 7 things that advertisers do to get consumers to buy, right? It's taking it in its own direction, and it's arguing that these advertisements and the way that they're marketed will actually impact culture. Let's see how the first paragraph develops it. So we'll just do the first paragraph, the first body paragraph. Advertising has reflected our interests as a society over the decades. Wheaties cereal has an extended ad campaign that focuses on professional and Olympic athletes. Beginning in 1934, the brand started featuring these sporty stars. It was around this same time that America's obsession with professional sports began. Lou Gehrig, Mary Lou Retton, Dale Earnhardt, and Michael Jordan are just a few of the famous athletes promoted on America's favorite cereal boxes. This Wheaties campaign is one of the cases most cited by marketing experts. Some might argue the campaign started as a reflection of American interests. Most, however, agree this was one of the first cases of advertising directly influencing our interests. Wheaties not only uses celebrities to promote their tasty cereal, they also use them to influence the interest of consumers. So here we can see that the argument uses a specific example. The one thing I would do if I were writing this paper is where it says beginning in 1934, I would put a citation right after that because that's not common knowledge unless you're a real serial aficionado, right? So anything that's not common knowledge, you should put a citation for right there the first time the information appears by at least the author's last name and if possible a page number. So that is an example of a body paragraph that is developing the thesis. It's not just saying we walked in a store and then our emotions made us purchase something. It's directly talking about how a specific ad campaign in 1934 influenced the interest by making America actually really pay attention to sports and integrating it with a breakfast choice as well. So I think that's a very good argument, and you could argue it. You could say, no, sports were going to be popular whether there was a Wheaties campaign or not. So this is exactly the kind of stuff that, I would like to see in your paper, right? Where you're making claims based on the information that you're presenting, and it ties back in to your thesis, right? Advertising heavily influences our culture. One more thing I want to say about this. This student opted to end with a question, right? So, who would want a world without the Energizer Bunny or the Geico Caveman anyway? Normally, I don't like the rhetorical question at the end, but in this case, right, the student made so many assertive claims, it's fine to end on something like that because it's clearly a question where you're supposed to go, those are awesome symbols, right? I don't want to be without the Energizer Bunny that just keeps going and going and going, right? I instantly recognize it, and it's something that, well, life would be a little different if I could imagine that it wasn't there, right? So that's a good kind of question to end on. But don't end with just a string of questions where you don't answer anything. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about today in this short video is I pulled out a few sample sentences. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I wanted to talk about integrating quotes, okay? So when you're integrating quotes into your paper, you have to make sure that it fits in there and that you're leading into it and that the quote is not doing the work of presenting your main ideas. You're still presenting your main ideas, even if the quote is backing it up. And they don't have to. You could disagree with them. So let's look at this example. This is the end of a paragraph. Good branding can be enhanced by using logos, jingles, or even mascots. And the next body paragraph starts with, I think that comma's an error. Marketing designs and packages products to make them more appealing, frames messages in more convincing ways, and sets price promotions that are hard to resist. Did you really plan to get those potato chips or just buy them to get the buy one, get one free offer? So if you put a quote inside a quote, you have to use apostrophes to quote that, right? Now, then we can go back to the author's words. Auditory cues also affect our buying habits. So it went from branding to a quote that talks about what marketing does to auditory cues. So in order to do this right, you shouldn't have the quote being your topic sentence. You should have something in here that transitions into your topic, right? Like this branding is often influenced by the extremely influential marketing departments or something like that, right? I'm just going to type that real quickly. Okay, so So we have that there. Now you may need to mess around with that a little bit, but in any case, right? Then you can transition into what marketing does. Oh, I know why it's making a mistake. All right, there we go. Sorry. All right. So some kind of transitional statement there that leads into the quote, and you should probably even introduce the article, like according to 7 things that whatever the title is of the particular article there, right? By Sampson, comma, marketing does this. All right. So I also want to look at this next one. I saw this pull quote a lot. If Little Eva cannot sleep, she can learn algebra instead, from that Postman article. Remember, Postman had a very negative view of technology and students' ability to actually want to use it on their own. He thought that students wouldn't, and that if they actually had an interest in that, they would have done it long before online learning was available. So you don't want to misrepresent your source's position either. So let's look at this paragraph here. When using this technology, it's best to ensure the user knows how to define the difference between a credible article and something that's filled with baseless information. If not used carefully, inaccurate information can be passed around. And that's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, right? And then with no transition, we go into this quote. If Leva cannot sleep, she can learn algebra instead. How's that related? I guess you would have to set this up just a little bit more and saying, with the availability of information, it's possible that someone could learn anything from the comfort of their home without any kind of supervision. For example, if Little Eva can't sleep, she can learn algebra instead. So you might want to try to set something like that up a little bit, but that's not Postman's statement. He quotes someone, Dr. Ravitch, who is like a Secretary of Education or something like that. They have like a title. So you should probably put, according to Dr. Ravitch of blah 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 Educational Department, if Little Eva can't sleep, she can learn algebra. And then you still have Postman in this parenthetical reference, and you have a page number as well there. Okay, so you want to be as accurate as possible. Postman then later says, "Where's she from? Mars? Who's going to get up at midnight to learn this stuff, right?" And then he goes on. The basic structure of his argument is that I've lived through all these things, like the 16 millimeter film and 8 millimeter, blah blah blah, and all these things, and it didn't succeed in replacing the teacher or having a lasting impact. It was just basically a false god, because he opens with the idea about true faith in something, and he says, "I know a false god when I see one." That's his conclusion. So he makes a metaphor, and you should think about how to introduce and end papers with metaphors as well if it's appropriate, because that belief doesn't have anything to do with the topic except the way that he draws the parallel, right? Where he says, hey, people have faith in this technology, but it's false. But we're in a very different position to judge the lasting impact of online and digital technologies than he was in 1995. So if you quote him, Postman, you should be accurate about his position, which is pretty negative, but you can argue against it, right? 1995, things were very, very different in terms of what was available for education and student usage. It's just normal for somebody to look up something they don't know right now in the quickest means possible, and he kind of ignores that. Okay, so a little more transition for those quotes there for this. So the comparison contrast, you've got a couple weeks to work on that. Start thinking about a topic. If you want to bounce one off on me, go ahead. The discussion board post that's due this Friday, or tomorrow really, if I get this uploaded in a timely fashion, is a different topic, right? It's a then and now kind of thing. So if you have any questions, please contact me and let me know. Thank you.